Texas is one of the biggest favorites in this tournament here. -12 in the first round. Notre Dame's -7, Penn State's -9, Ohio State's -7.5, but -12. I don't know about you, Abe. That feels a little big to me. Neither team has been particularly good against its best opponents. Ironically, that best opponent for both of these teams is the same team. That's the University of Georgia. They're 0-3 collectively against that team. But at least Clemson has a win against another team in the college football playoff. Texas can't necessarily say that. Their best win, probably Texas A&M. Outside of that, maybe
Vanderbilt's the other one.
Michigan, Vanderbilt on the road. I mean, it's not super impressive. It's not the most invaluable resume that we've seen, but it's good enough to get them the number 5 seed. They're the highest ranked seed of any of the non-bye teams. So, look, they're a good football team. I'm not going to crap on Texas by any stretch of the imagination because I think Clemson has a very difficult road if they want to win this game. I think their path to a win, it lines up very similarly to what we saw against SMU in the ACC Championship game. It's get some turnovers, take advantage of the turnovers, score points very early in the game. And even then, they still almost lost that game to Kevin Jennings and company. We'll talk about SMU here in a little bit. But look, that's really what you have to do in this game. And Texas has shown a propensity to throw interceptions, to fumble the ball. They did it a lot against Georgia. They did it against Diego Pavia and Vanderbilt. But that Tiger defense needs to have a big day because Texas's offense, it only has 1 touchdown in their last 6 quarters. It is getting back Kelvin Banks, who won a Lombardi Trophy and the Outland Award. So I wonder how much success that defense can really have against Texas. It's a really good offense, right? And then that gets me to my secondary question. How long of a leash does does Quinn Ewers have before Arch Manning potentially comes in and gets some looks? What do you think?
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, you mentioned Clemson's going to need turnovers, and you hit on it. Yeah, Texas will potentially give you the ball a couple of times. So we'll see if that plays into it. I sent you a text, a graphic a couple of weeks ago before you spent some time in Vegas potentially betting on this game. But you know, I pulled it back up. Texas is number 1 nationally in yards per play defensively, 2nd in points per game allowed, and the best overall at preventing 20-plus yard plays per game. And I said, is Texas's defense really this good? Or is it kind of a combination of the offenses that Texas has played? And when you talk about what's their best win, Texas A&M's offense is no good. Michigan's offense is no good. Oklahoma's offense is no good. Vanderbilt's okay. And then obviously they struggled mightily when they had to face a little bit better, stronger offense in the Georgia Bulldogs. I think they're going to be tested again. I don't know if this stat is like, hey, this is the reason Texas is here. They are one of the best defenses in the country. But I do think Clemson is going to be able to push them a little bit if Phil Moff is 100%. And I think separating this game from obviously when the conference championships were, you're going to have 18, 20 days, whatever it's been. And that's going to be something I bring up over the course of this podcast is how many players got close to 100%. And that, by the way, includes Texas quarterback Quinn Ewers. Yeah. I'm not as quick with this leash discussion is will they turn to Arch Manning? I understand why, but I think with the time off, I think with the prep, you probably devoted as much time as possible in practice to getting Quinn Ewers ready. You know, we're talking about it here in Atlanta, Garrett, and the Falcons made a quarterback change, and there was a discussion like, hey, Michael Penix hasn't thrown to any of these guys. I wouldn't be surprised if it's relatively similar with Texas, where Quinn Ewers is getting just the bulk of the work, and I don't know how much Arch has really thrown to those guys. Now, obviously, if it's like that bad, historically bad, and you need a spark, then sure. But if you're talking about like 2 touchdowns, 1 interception type of game, you know, I'm just not as quick to pull. That's all. And then the other question is which Texas run game is going to show up? Obviously, in the games against the Georgia Bulldog, those 2 losses, they didn't get much. They didn't get much from Wisner. They didn't get much from their offensive line. It was a real problem. But we have seen games in which they have been able to dominate up front, and they have been able to get going, and especially against Texas A&M. That was Wisner's best game of the season. And so can they get the run game going to help support Quinn Ewers to kind of take the pressure off, make it so he doesn't have to slinging around the field. And then the other question is the Texas run defense.
Mhm.
It just feels like you talked about Clemson probably needs some turnovers. They also need to run the ball, and that includes Cade Klubnik with his legs. If I were Clemson, if I were a Clemson fan, the one thing I want to avoid is trying to go throw for throw with
Yeah.
Texas. I think they got a better receiving core. And quite frankly, I think they have a quarterback that's a little bit more big game tested, a little bit more for the moment. He hasn't always performed great in those games, but he's at least been in that situation. It feels like a little bit more than Klubnik, although Klubnik obviously just led this team to an ACC title game and did well in that game. This is a fascinating combination of two orange teams that's going to go down. And the other thing we'll talk about across all four of these games at varying degrees, the home field advantage for Texas. What's it going to be like? It is an afternoon game. I think it should help them out a lot, as will, as you mentioned, a return of Kelvin Banks. And so very interested. But Clemson's got to play old school football, right? Like we're going to talk about all these teams, Indiana and SMU, and what some of these teams can do. Clemson, Tennessee, even Notre Dame to an extent. What are they looking to do to dominate? Run the ball and play defense. In up-tempo world that college football has become, there are still some throwback squads that win by doing what you did in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. They're bringing it back. That's how Clemson wins this game if they can do it. But, man, you look for Quinn Ewers to hit some big passes. I think that is going to be the difference if Texas pulls away. I think they have a very good receiving core, and I think Quinn Ewers is up for the moment.
Yeah, I think that's really the biggest thing for this team. I mean, you got to be ready. And largely this season, Cade Klubnik has not been ready for that moment. He hasn't been super great throughout the course of the season. He was against SMU. He goes for nearly 300 yards, 4 touchdowns in that game, most of that coming in the first half. And that's what I'm saying. Like, that's that Clemson team. If that Clemson team shows up and punches Texas in the mouth, I worry about Texas's ability to respond because they really have not been punched in the mouth except for when they played Georgia in that first meeting. You know, that team that they played in the SEC Championship game didn't really punch them in the mouth like they did it that first time. So if Clemson's able to do that, then I think they have a shot. But if they don't do that and Clemson gets behind and you need Cade Klubnik to do it with his arm and just his arm, then I worry for Clemson. And that just feels like the logical path of this game. I feel like we've been very hard on Texas here so far in this preview, but it's just they haven't stepped up at this point in the season. You know, I mean, like, they are not somebody who I feel like has done everything that they can in the biggest games that they played because they just really haven't had a lot of opportunities to do that. But the physicality, I think Texas is going to be able to match that or surpass it, especially with Banks coming back. I think that's going to be a big deal for them. But one other quick nugget I want to throw out here. Actually, Cade Klubnik and Quinn Ewers actually played in this game, this style of game, right? In the state championship game, the 6A state championship game back in 2021. Cade Klubnik won the first time. So I wonder if Quinn Ewers is going to be back for some revenge. But the winner of this one goes on and plays Arizona State in the Fiesta Bowl. Do you want to go ahead and make picks for this game, or what do you think?
I think Texas is just a little bit better. I love the explosion they have potentially in their receiving core. I think if they can stay balanced at any little bit with Wisner, they can comfortably win this game. I just have a tough time believing Clemson can really go if this game gets into the higher 20s and low 30s. And like we said, run the ball and play defense. But it takes 2 to tango. Clemson running the ball only works if Texas lets you, and I don't think they're going to. I just don't know if Klubnik can go throw for throw with Quinn Ewers. I would take Texas in this game.
I agree. Whether or not they cover the spread, I think it's a big number, 12. I am also going to go with Texas. I think Arch Manning actually makes a second half appearance in this game. I think they start slow, but they bring in the backup quarterback, and we'll see what happens. And it's not a knock on Quinn Ewers either. I think he's a very capable and effective quarterback. I think he's done a lot of good things all season this year, but I just don't know if Wisner's going to be enough to do it on the ground by himself. And I think they need a spark on offense. And I think that spark is going to be Arch Manning. for better or for worse for this team. But I agree. I'm going to take the Texas Longhorns to move on and play Arizona State.